Well, hello, I'm Jeff Baumgartner, a senior editor at Light Reading, and welcome to Signal Strength, a podcast from Light Reading, focused on all things broadband video and streaming, and where we break down some of the headlines in those categories with an emphasis on the technologies, policies, and other things that are driving them all forward. And in this episode of Signal Strength, I caught up with David Wright, Policy Director at Spectrum for the Future, and Jason Wallin, a board member of the OnGo Alliance. And what we did is we dug into the state of play for the CBRS band, which is being used by some cable operators to help offload wireless data and some of the MVNO costs, getting rid of some of those. And they're also using it to deliver some fixed wireless services, and it's become a go-to for some private wireless services. And Jason, whose day job is with John Deere, is involved with several projects and deployments in that area. So we caught up as the FCC and the NTIA look around for spectrum that can be used for 5G and future 6G services, and also some high power services that could maybe get fitted into the CBRS band. And there's been some interest in the CBRS band for this kind of purpose, and some thoughts about maybe relocating some of the existing users. And that would be a little bit of a problem, and it would no doubt cause some serious disruption for those existing users and wreak some havoc on the product ecosystem that's formed around CBRS. But is CBRS really under siege, or does the current debate amount to a relatively muted threat? So that's what we're going to dig in today during our podcast. So let's get to it. Well, hey, Dave and Jason, welcome to the Signal Strength podcast. Glad to have you both here today. I know we've been trying to get together. So today we're going to dive into the regulatory world of CBRS and the deployment world. And of course, CBRS is a slice of shared spectrum that we here at Light Reading have been keeping tabs on for several years. And I think it's a pretty super interesting use case, because of the shared aspect and how new users have been coexisting with the incumbent users. And the band uses this mix of general access and priority access. And then from my end of it, though, I cover the cable guys quite a bit, and they're among the relatively new users of the band. And I think it's fair to say that Charter has been pretty aggressive there from that group, and they're using it to offset MVNO costs, or starting to use it that way, and working on this fiber powered DAS project, which kind of expands that adoption. And Comcast is out there testing it. Operators like Mediacom and Cox have been using it for fixed wireless access. Jason, we're going to talk a little bit about how John Deere, has been using it. But there's a lot of other use cases and adopters out there. So, of course, it's like, why are we talking about it today, right? Well, as the FCC pushes ahead with the mandate to open up hundreds of megahertz of spectrum for 5G and 6G, future 6G services, the challenges they face is like, where do we locate spectrum, since it's not like there's a bunch of it just sitting out there going, hey, come use me for something. Some of that's going to come from the upper C-band, which is going to be auctioned no later than July 2027. So, that work's underway. But, we're also seeing some folks kind of eyeing the CBRS band for this purpose, and perhaps looking to have the folks there relocate. And, we've got AT&T advocating for kind of repurposing that band. So today we're going to talk about the state of play, in CBRS, and, is it under threat, as the FCC looks high and low for spectrum? And if so, how big of a threat does that represent? So, so that we're clear, both of you are from a side of the argument, right, where you're representing organizations that are fighting, or at least defending and advocating like a hands-off approach here. So To begin, just to get everybody's bearings, I want to have each of you just do like a brief overview of your organizations and kind of how it fits into the CBRS discussion. So, uh, Dave, maybe have you start, and then Jason, you can follow.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you on the pod. And let's see, who am I? So Dave Wright, I'm the policy director with Spectrum for the Future. Spectrum for the Future is an advocacy organization representing essentially all of the interests in the CBRS band. So, you mentioned cables participation. You also mentioned fixed wireless. That's, we work with a lot of the wireless internet service providers who are using CBRS to deliver residential and business broadband. Mostly in rural areas, but some are in suburban areas and suburban markets as well. So there's the whole fixed wireless community. There is the whole private networks community. I think Jason can speak to that in some detail. But CBRS is the private LTE and now private 5G band in the U.S., and that's spurring a tremendous amount of activity across. Again, I don't want to steal Jason's thunder, but across a bunch of different sectors. So again, Spectrum for the Future, we have member companies and member organizations across all of those sectors, and we are advocating for promoting CBRS and all that it has enabled in this country, and arguing that ultimately we will need more spectrum similar to CBRS for the range of use cases that I talked about. So that's who I am.
Great. Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate being here today. I'm Jason Wallin. I am a board of director member for the OnGo Alliance, which basically is the industry group that does the work around CBRS. Some of our members include folks like radio manufacturers, as well as end users like myself, and then also wireless ISP type organizations, as well as just anybody that uses this shared spectrum going forward. So again, lots of interests inside there that we support. Very strong advocates of CBRS, because that is what we do, and really the key foundational piece of America's innovation band, which is what CBRS was designed to be. That is not my primary job, however. My day job is actually working as a senior principal architect for Tech Stack at John Deere, and in that I have responsibility for what is our networking strategy inside our factories, and because of that, we're a large believer and deployer of CBRS networks in our manufacturing facilities in the U.S., and then likewise other private cellular networks in our factories throughout the world.
Yeah. And how extensively are you using CBRS right now? And are you using like general access, or do you have PAL licenses, or kind of what's your setup?
Excellent question. In our 5 major Midwest counties where we do the vast majority of our manufacturing, we bought and purchased PAL licenses for our facilities there. In some of our other facilities throughout the United States, we use GAA spectrum. And even where we do have PALs, we augment that with GAA spectrum as well. So really a blended approach to be able to support both of those going forward.
All right. So you have a lot of skin in the game here for CBRS. Okay.
Very much.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about CBRS, and as the FCC moves ahead with this mandate to find and auction off spectrum for 5G and 6G. I think we have some guidance, on the upper C-band, like I talked about earlier. But that's opened some discussion about, hey, what about CBRS? Let's poke our head in there and see what's going on. And we're going to dig into the details here. But based on that discussion, what's your view on the current threat level, if you will, on CBRS? I mean, do you feel that CBRS is under siege, or could be soon, or is it just like, okay, they're kind of poking around here, so we need to stay ahead of it?
I'll jump in on that one. So let's see, just to give a little bit more background on what the mandates actually are. So we're all talking here about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was signed into law in early July. And you mentioned the FCC. The other government entity everybody needs to be aware of is the NTIA, right? So you got the FCC, which manages commercial spectrum in the country. You got NTIA, which manages the government or federal spectrum in the country. So the act mandates that the FCC is going to find 300 megahertz of spectrum to make available for full power exclusive use, essentially mobile operator sort of macro cellular uses. So the FCC has a 300 megahertz target. As you said, 100 megahertz of that was fast tracked and has to come out of the upper C band, which is 3.98 to 4.2. We can circle back to that. The other 200 could really come from anywhere per the FCC's mandate. Then NTIA on the federal side is supposed to find 500 megahertz of spectrum that can be essentially repurposed from federal use to, again, commercial high power exclusive use for the mobile industry.
Okay.
So there's two parallel things going on. The FCC has this near term, they've got it by July 27, conduct an auction, actually award licenses in upper C band. So that's like the kind of hot burner issue for the FCC right now. NTIA on the federal side, in terms of repurposing federal spectrum for this commercial high power use, they were given, it wasn't directly tied to that mandate about 500 megahertz, but one of the next paragraphs was, and here are 3 bands that you should study. and those bands were 2.7 to 2.9 gigahertz, 4.4 to 4.94 gigahertz, and 7.25 to 7.4. So that was the mandate that they have. So we've been very closely monitoring everything coming out of the FCC and the administration and NTIA since July. That gives us some indication of what's going on. Upper C band sucking all the oxygen out of the room at the moment, right? And there'll be an NPRM on that, again, an auction in the next year and a half. Some of the indications right now is that NTIA, the FCC, working with other agencies like the FAA, because you got the altimeter sitting right above 4.2, they're thinking they could get more than 100 megahertz. In fact, there's been talk of 150 or 160 megahertz potentially coming out, coming out of upper C band. So were that to happen, that would satisfy like half of the FCC's target. Good stuff.
Well, that's good news.
That would be good news from a CBRS perspective anyway. The study bands that NTIA was given, it seems like everybody's in agreement that the 4.4 to 4.94 range is the priority, that's where the focus is. It's 500 megahertz or 540 megahertz of spectrum in the first place. There is an existing cellular equipment ecosystem there. It's called Band N79. It's used in parts of Asia. Some of Europe is starting to use it. So there's equipment there. It could be relatively quickly put into service for the mobile industry. So, and then there's 2.7 to 2.9 and then 7 gigahertz. So all of that to say, when I look at what Chairman Carr has said, and some Commissioner Trustee, Commissioner Gomez, Ariel Roth, who's the NTIA Administrator Undersecretary of Commerce for NTIA, as well as some of the administration statements, CBRS doesn't seem to be on anybody's near-term radar for these targets. So that gives me some sense of things aren't necessarily in near-term
on the back burner or even further back, or not even on the burner?
Well, if it's on a burner, it's way at the back of the stove. Let's put it that way. And and I'm not even sure it's on the stove to begin with.
Okay.
But there are some open questions, and that uncertainty that's lingering around CBRS. There's even before this bill and this act, were even discussed, the FCC had opened up a proceeding looking at CBRS, and that's another topic we should at least touch on. So going back to last, I think it was either October, November of 24, the FCC opened again a notice of proposed rulemaking on CBRS. Most of it was just sort of tidying up stuff that needed to be dealt with. There were some grandfather protections that no longer applied. There was a bunch of enhancements to CBRS that all of the government and industry people who had created the band in the first place got back together and said, hey, we've been doing this for 5 years. It's worked well. We have not interfered with the Navy radar systems, which is the incumbent governments in the band. We haven't interfered with them at all. Could we relax those protections and make a little bit better use of the band? We all agreed, yeah, we can do that. So they actually came up with some nice enhancements to CBRS, and this was like about a year, well, call it last summer. So the FCC needs to, codify all of those enhancements. So those were good things that were in this NPRM. But the FCC also asked, should we think about changing the power levels in the band?
Yes. Yeah, I was wondering, there'd be some good background there, because it seems like it's like another element of the debate, right? So can you talk a little bit about it's like, okay, CBRS today is what, lower power, and there's this advocacy on, well, what about a high power use, and sometimes it's kind of a hard one to get my head around. So it'd be really good to just kind of set or kind of get a fix on that debate, and how the current use is, and why would you want to go high power, or why would somebody want to look at that?
Jason, you want to run with that? You want me to go?
Yeah. No, I'd be happy to address that. I think when it comes to the power settings inside there, largely the way that CBRS is unique in this space is because of the low power nature of it. There, we are able to share very closely with neighbors even across the street and be able to keep signals inside the building, or if outside the building, because of the lower radiated power coming from it, you can come up with mitigation plans either through the SAS or just being good neighbors and tilting your antennas down just a little bit and being able to manage some of that coexistence. I think if we start to talk about bringing macro power levels into this, it really confuses the situation there. I know there's some studies going on right now to understand exactly what that would mean to the space there, but just intuitively, myself in it as a user of these networks and other network operators that I've talked to, there is fear and concern that really what happens is that you might get some high powered people that come in and are able to overpower a lot of the manufacturers or the healthcare operators that are using this solution and actually cause that signal to be able to be degraded inside the facilities where those are used. And by doing that, it would really impact CBRS's ability to be effective going forward too.
Yeah. So in a way, they're like, well, hey, we could. So the way they're looking at it is like, well, would we have high power and low power users in the band? And the issue is like one could like push the other one out or kind of bully it,
right?
in a way. Yeah. Okay.
And what's been so beautiful about the CBRS setup so far is, the entire time we've had this since the initial PAL auctions, there's not been a single reported incident to the government of, with them as the incumbent holder of the spectrum being interfered with by any of the other users of the band in that space. And that's kind of what allowed that relaxing of the standards in CBRS, the CBRS 2.0, as we would call it, to come to fruition, just because of that good stewardship of the spectrum that we had and being able to share nicely. Adding that additional power would significantly complicate that and make management of that even more challenging. Dave, would you have anything else that you would add there?
Yeah, thanks. And just to bring some numbers into play here. So the current CBRS as it was envisioned and as we know it and love it today allows for two categories of base station radios, what we call CBSDs in CBRS. And there's category A, which is essentially indoor, and this is kind of Wi-Fi power levels. So we're talking 30 dBm over the 10 megahertz channel, and 30 dBm is 1 watt. So 1 watt of radiated power. indoors. If you go outdoors, you can do what I would consider sort of a picocell type of a deployment, and this is what's called Category B. And those Category B base stations can operate up to 47 dBm per 10 megahertz, which equates to 50 watts of radiated power. So it's a small cell band. As Jason said, that allows us to pack a lot of radios into a given geographical area, support multiple users, multiple use cases, and that's what we're doing today. Some of the advocacy in this FCC proceeding from just a couple of parties, and it's the people who have high power exclusive licensed spectrum already, they would like to make it more similar to what they've got in the existing C-band allocations at 3.7 to 3.98 or in the 3.45 band. So this is like 62 dBm per 10 megahertz or 72 dBm per 10 megahertz. And remember, dBms are on a log, so dBs are on a log. So instead of a 50 watt maximum power, you're talking about like 1,500 watts, so 30 times if you're talking 62 dBm, or 15,000 watts of power at 72 dBm, right? So it's an order of magnitude more power that's being discussed. And that kills spectrum efficiency and reuse. Instead of being able to put 100 radios into this area, I can now put 10 or less probably without them interfering with one another. So
you'd lose the diversity in there, kind of. Yeah.
Squeeze out all the smaller players.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be the band, as Jason already mentioned, it was envisioned as an innovation band. It has been an innovation band. The things that people are doing with it, we've just spent two days hearing about, what industrial manufacturers, airports are doing with CBRS, and it's crazy the different use cases that people have come up with. And so it's fulfilling its role as an innovation band, and you've got a few people saying, no, we want to turn it into yet another macro cellular band. And it's like, well, you've got a ton of other spectrum for that. This is the only spectrum we have for this innovation, private network stuff. So that's where we're at.
All right. Well, and if we kind of pull everything together, though, with the debate and kind of look at the big picture view, you said it's kind of like maybe that back burner or even not on the stove, but yeah, it sounds like the threat level, at least momentarily, is pretty low. With the potential to rise, and maybe to use like a war games example, are we like I can't remember if 5 is the worst, but like what's the DEFCON? I couldn't remember. Is like 5 like horrible and 1's, or
I think 5 is we're launching.
Movie in a while.
I think 5 means missiles are in the air. So yeah.
Okay. 5 is like, oh crap. Okay, so we're kind of at what, 1 or 2 maybe.
Okay, I'd put it at 1.5 or 2 right now. Okay. But like you said, these are aggressive targets. I mean, for FCC and NTIA to hit these targets that they have from Congress, they got a lot of hard work ahead of them. So, and it's a 10-year window for all of it. So, what could happen in the next decade? Yeah. It could move off the stove entirely, which is what I would like to see. So it's the uncertainty that I don't like. And, Jason can speak for himself, but I just want there to be certainty about CBRS, that it's going to continue to exist and hopefully continue to exist in the current form, current power levels, so that people can continue to make the investments in the band. I think any uncertainty around the future of CBRS is unhelpful for deployment.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe some of the good news, at least in the near term, right, is that we have seen some others come out and are opposed to kind of fiddling or disrupting things in that band. We've got Commissioner Anna Gomez has been out there saying that. You had a group of Republican senators talk about that from both like the CBRS and the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi stuff, which is outside the scope of our discussion today. But so I guess those are some good advocates. Are those messages resonating right now? It doesn't feel like we've seen a lot of specific activity like, oh, we need to dig in there. I guess AT&T's thoughts about CBRS kind of adds a wrinkle, right? they'd like to see some changes.
Right. Oh, as we think about that, and specifically some of the proposals that are out there, I think there are lots of hidden costs and lots of impact to the economy in that state as well. Because as we look at, one of the major targets of the administration is reshoring a lot of manufacturing, and a lot of significant announcements have been made around, the number of billions of dollars worth of investment that's being made, and then what that translates to for American jobs. When we classify that type of manufacturing that is coming back, it's you could classify it's about 85% of that is either high-tech manufacturing or at least mid-tech manufacturing, and both of those require an Internet of Things or an industrial Internet of Things for that manufacturing space. So to be competitive in the manufacturing areas with this, it is critical that we continue to keep the CBRS open as a path, and even other wireless technologies to be able to deliver that. But it's going to take the level of communication to do things like computer vision, machine learning inside the factory, the automation for assembly, using AI to help optimize manufacturing operations throughout the facility there, just to make sure these manufacturers are as efficient with their investment in U.S. manufacturing.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Yeah, Dave.
No, I was just going to say on your question about some of the recent government communication about CBRS. Yes, I certainly noticed Commissioner Trustee at the America Spectrum Management Conference a little over a month ago was talking about how CBRS has positioned the U.S. as the leadership of dynamic spectrum management, and how much we've learned from CBRS and how much we need to build on that learning going forward. So that was Commissioner Trustee. Commissioner Gomez, just on the 20th of November, they had their open meeting for the month, and she was asked about CBRS after the meeting, and she was talking about how it's been a great success, the innovation it spurred, the competition it has spurred. And this was a reporter asking her, does she think there's going to be any changes to the band? And she said, right now there's nothing in play. The chairman's office seems very focused on upper C-band, and were something to come across my desk that represented fundamental or significant changes to the band, I'd have some grave concerns. You mentioned the letter from the 10 senators, Republican senators, to Chairman Carr saying, please don't mess with CBRS for 6 gigahertz. There was another letter from, I think it was all the Republican members of the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Communications and Technology. And it was essentially a very similar message to Chairman Carr saying, CBRS is enabling all this rural connectivity, these private wireless deployments. And, as you strive to meet the OBBA, OB3A goals, don't mess with CBRS. So That's all very positive.
Yeah. Well, let's say disaster strikes. Okay. And, the current users in there have to vacate somewhere, relocate somewhere. How hard, expensive, or disruptive would it be for the current CBRS users to do that? CBN, we've seen some success with that, but it's a different animal, right? Because a lot of video and then go terrestrial, so it's less of an issue here. But it seems like it would be a little bit different for CBRS. I don't know, Jason. You've already, with John Deere already being in there, I guess that would be pretty disruptive.
Right.
You had to change everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Real good question. As you think about that, there's probably a couple of costs that could be potential inside there if that worst case scenario were to reveal itself. And a lot of people would just simply say, well, it's going to cost a little bit. You've got to stand up a new network. first of all, we'd have to find a home for that new network there. Some have advocated, in that 3.1 space to potentially look at that. But we don't have a device ecosystem that's available to us today in that area, or anything that has been defined in 3GPP. So you could use that with traditional cellular networks, at least now. So that probably puts, 18, 24 months worth of backlog there before you would have the standard established. Then once the standard was established, going back to the ecosystem to start building devices to be able to fit in there. So now, you're 3 to 4 years in that process to be able to make that change. And as devices had come along, in the CBRS space there, right? It was we needed to build the ecosystem, and first of all, build the networks, get everything defined, and then that's when the clients that we use inside the factories or other manufacturers use inside the factories for things like torque controllers and autonomous robots that run through the factory, and then also connected forklifts, those type of things. We would have to go through a design cycle to develop all of that. And I guess I say all of that to say, we would lose a significant amount of time, but also there are many players in this ecosystem that would have to move. It's not just the network itself and the network infrastructure that would have to move, but every connected device that exists in the CBRS system today would have to be moved somewhere else as well. And you're dealing with well over 1,700 devices today that we've got, qualified and up and running in this space, and then other devices that are in flight for approval and configuration in this space as well. So significant R&D effort by a lot of the endpoint manufacturers. And again, it's not like when a manufacturer invests, $10 to $20 million in a machining station, that they're going to replace that very expensive fixed asset just because there's a radio change that comes with that too.
So, two things. We're talking about, what would it take for the commercial ecosystem that exists in CBRS to move? But you've got to remember, we all are operating in and around the existing federal incumbents in the band, which is the U.S. military, the Navy, to be precise. So, any thought of repurposing the band for high power, exclusive use presumes that the Navy has gone somewhere else. So that's the first thing, right? And that's not
seems to be
that's not a quick or inexpensive thing. Yeah,
the long pole. Yeah,
right. So there's that, and then to Jason's point, I would just say, people have said, well, can't you move to somewhere lower 3 or somewhere in 4 or in 6 or somewhere else, right? Just pick up and move. Okay.
So pick a band, any band.
You cannot do something innovative in a band where there's no ecosystem. You just cannot do that. That doesn't work. TV white spaces is a great example of why that doesn't work. So you tell me you need me to go somewhere else and pick up my ecosystem. Okay, fine. I need to be between 3.4 and 4 gigahertz because that's where there is a large, global, vibrant ecosystem of cellular equipment, chipsets on the billions of unit scale, so you can get, incorporated into new devices, and you don't have to convince Qualcomm and MediaTek and all these other folks, Broadcom, that they need to buy it or they need to make it because they're already making it for all the smartphones. So 3.4 to 4, and that's exactly what the mobile industry wants as well. So we'd just be fighting in a different context. So that's kind of a non-starter. You say you want to go below 3.4 or above 4, and I'm like, well, there's no ecosystem, so I really don't want to have that discussion. So there is no alternative for us. If you tell us we've got to move somewhere else, it's taken us almost 20 years of effort to create what we have today in CBRS. You would, and we haven't really even talked about how CBRS has made the U.S. the global leader in these private networks, like Jason and his organization are deploying and managing. So we would go from being like global leaders in private LTE and private 5G to we don't even have an option for that if you screw up CBRS.
All right. Well, one thing, Jason, even like any degree of uncertainty around CBRS, how does that affect like John Deere's interest in CBRS going forward, right? Has any part of this discussion slowed down or delayed anything you want to do with CBRS? And I ask that because G.R. Wallin, the CTO of Mediacom, they're using CBRS for a fixed wireless service called Mediacom Bolt, and he had expressed that even any level of uncertainty there puts kind of a quote unquote damper on things, and I don't know how that translates into what they're going to do or don't do with CBRS. But has any of this affected John Deere's plans?
I think largely on our part, we are fully committed to CBRS and going forward. But if I were to put my hat on of an industry manufacturer coming into this right now, saying I have a choice between one set of technologies and another, and CBRS being one of those options, and if there was a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the top of it, it certainly wouldn't be a pro in favor of that technology there as well. If if that were to come to pass, I think that on new adoption, that would slow that. And really, I think the best thing that could happen for CBRS right now at the moment is to remove any cloud of uncertainty that exists with that. And we can get back to the adoption curve that we had seen previously with that. Because we've got over 1,000 unique network operators today that are using the CBRS space there, and want to just continue to see that grow and blossom even further than where it's gone today.
Okay. And last thing, because I know we only have a couple minutes here left, but I guess this is more of a crystal ball type of question, and there's still a lot of unknowns, but when do you think this will be kind of be resolved one way or the other? Like, you'll know for sure that CBRS will be untouched, or there will be something that could change things. Is it like within 5 years, 10 years? Is that kind of the window when we'll know this, or is it sooner than that?
I've been doing this spectrum regulatory stuff for a while, and it's unfortunately the reality is these issues are never entirely settled, right? But you go through phases where there's maybe a little bit it feels like things are certain for some period of time, and then maybe something happens. There's a change in administration or change just in policy, and things change. So 6 gigahertz, I know we touched on that before we started the pod, and that's one that has been going on forever. I've been working on CBRS advocacy for a long time now. I expect I could probably make another decade or two doing it. But I think the current issue around the power levels with the NPRM, I would hope that the FCC would settle that in the next. Frankly, I would hope that they would settle that in the next 6 to 9 months, and just
pretty quick.
Just do the administrative stuff and decide not to do anything in regards to power levels. That's what I would hope we might see in the next 6 to 9 months on that. And then in terms of the any potential issues from the OB3A legislation, I think we'll see pretty quickly where the NTIA and the FCC are really going with their need to fill those out. I mean, again, they're not easy targets. Some of it will take some time, but I think we'll see priorities and focus, and that will also, I think, provide some more certainty around whether CBRS is going to be impacted, which I'm hopeful that it will not be.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you for that. Well, I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. My thanks to Dave and Jason for joining the episode of Signal Strength Podcast. It was great to have you here with us and offer some important thoughts about the potential fate of CBRS band. So I'll look forward to staying in touch as the debate continues. And as I wrap it up, some special thanks to Pierre Landra for editing this episode. And please be sure to subscribe to the Light Reading Podcast for future episodes, including Signal Strength and Nicole Ferraro's podcast, The Divide. So with that, thanks for catching this episode, and we'll see you next time.